Hello, hello. Welcome back this morning to The Breakdown. I'm Carl, and I'm your host. For those of you who don't know, we are 1 week out from Broadway Unlocked's #GiveBack concert. Now, the Give Back concert raises money for our friends over at the Crime Victims Treatment Center. At CVTC, the majority of their funds actually come through grants. And when a nonprofit gets money that way, the money is often completely regulated as to how they can use it. So that means that to get money to pay for therapists, you have to apply for grant money, specifically paying for therapists. To pay for products that help the survivors, you know, same bit. The money that we raise for CVTC is completely unregulated, which means CVTC can use that money in whatever way they need, which is so important. It might be for repairs or updates to the building in any way, or for the reason that we actually started doing these concerts, just to get the kids a nice coloring table for the waiting area. All this to say, please think about donating to the Give Back concert and tuning in to the live stream. It's completely free to watch, and there's going to be some really exciting performers this year that you don't want to miss out on. If you want more information, check out our Facebook page or our website, BroadwayUnlocked.com, for more information. Folks, let us get rolling this morning and introduce our folks. First off, I'm going to introduce my friend, Jermaine Blackwell. How's it going this morning?
What's up? Good morning, guys.
Good morning. We have one more guest joining us this morning. We've got Christina Seju.
Hello, everyone.
Christina is an actress who has been in Broadway favorites such as American Idiot, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, and most recently was in NBC's Jesus Christ Superstar live in concert.
Yes.
How was that? Was that like super fun?
Oh, it was amazing. It's kind of like the artist dream, especially since I've been doing musical theater for so long. It was nice to integrate finally musical theater and TV, and to see how both works actually and wonderfully in sync, actually. And it was really fun. The cast was amazing. Everyone always came in ready to work. And John and Sarah Bareilles and Alice Cooper, everyone was just so ready and willing to give their all. It was amazing.
So I think the most important question that Jermaine and I want to know about this is, did you get to meet Chrissy Teigen?
Well, not meet her personally, but she came to a few of the rehearsals when we were in the Armory, and she brought her little girl. They were so cute, but she was very pregnant, and so she kind of just like very much stayed in the background. So that way, because I mean, there was like a lot of things happening on the stage, and I think for her sake, she probably just wanted to stay out of the way. But she was very lovely.
So.
Yeah.
I also really have a question, real quick. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Because I'm curious. So you have been, like, the 3 shows that Carl just mentioned are pretty high profile shows for multiple different reasons.
Okay.
American Idiot, you are, the Grammys. Spider-Man is the Spider-Man story of what happened with that. And then this is a huge, huge production that was on TV. What was the most rock star of the 3?
I would definitely say American Idiot. There was something about American Idiot that really, one, I was really young and very green. Before that, I had done Rent, so I kind of felt like I was seasoned into this rock world because I was on tour for 10 months. But there was just something about American Idiot where Michael Mayer tapped into your authenticity. And it wasn't really about being like a rock star on the surface. It was really about trying to tap in. Who are you and what makes you a rock star? And how can we find that authenticity, that identity, and pull that out and make that individual? But there's just something about the music, especially since that music was of my decade. Because I was in New York City during 9/11. So I was able to experience a lot of the chaos that where this album was actually inspired. And so I would say definitely for me, American Idiot was that show that tapped into my inner rock star.
Awesome.
See, that's so cool because I feel like the world of like casting and things is kind of changing from what at least like was taught while I was in school. And it used to be like, oh, you have to figure out your type and you have to fit a type and, you know, like you have to be the ingenue, you have to be this. And it's so cool to start seeing pieces that are saying, no, we think you're cool and we want to make this about you. And we want to find what your path is and like how that influences how you create art and how you interpret things. And we want to really highlight that. That's so fun.
Right. Right. Actually, when I first auditioned for the workshop, I think I was like 23, 24 years old and 23. And the project was actually called the Untitled Punk Rock Musical. And I didn't even know that Green Day was actually necessarily attached to it. I just knew it was an untitled punk rock musical. And considering I just came from the Rent tour, I felt very fresh into my my ability to kind of just do things with my voice because I was a swing on that tour. So I covered all of the women. So I felt like I had this ability of all like literally freedom to do anything. I felt this relentlessness, this fearlessness. And I was like, I have no idea what the show is about, but I feel prepared for whatever it is because I just came from a tour that I felt like geared me for anything.
Yeah. And if you're going to sing every female role in Rent, you got,
Yes.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yes.
You spoke on fearlessness in that particular situation. Was there any fear for you? And I'm not trying to make news. I'm just curious.
Please,
was there any
let's do
fear?
it.
Yeah, fear for you in Spider-Man?
Absolutely not. I feel like when you take on a project as an artist, it's our duty to kind of just have this sense of openness. You know, first off, you have the choice. Once you get cast, you have the choice to do it. And so even when I auditioned, I already made the choice that I was going to do the show if I got cast. So is my face frozen in that?
Yeah.
My face like so no, I wasn't actually afraid. I felt like when I got there, they were very protective. I feel like when a couple of accidents occur prior to me getting there, they were extra very much on their job just to make sure that everyone felt safe, everyone was protected, and that we can have the safest, best show as possible.
And I'm sure to an extent, like people, as we do with everything, like a narrative was created and then people wanted to run with that.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
like from then on, if you heard, oh, you know, somebody like slipped in the bathroom of Spider-Man, people would be like, oh, here it is. Once again, you know, like I was listening to a podcast. I talk about it now every week because it's my favorite thing. It's called Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. And this week he had Chris Hardwick on. And at one point they were talking about how once you tell your brain to notice something, you notice it everywhere. So like if someone says, wow, this room has a lot of brown in it, all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh yeah, there's a box over there and that table's brown. And it's the same with life. You know, like if you say, oh, look how terrible things in our world are, you're going to go, oh yeah, well, there's stuff happening with North Korea. There's all the Me Too stuff there. You're going to start looking for that. And I feel like it's the same in ways with how we look at things like Spider-Man. Is once a couple things happened, people had their eyes on it for every misstep.
Yes, and to add on to that, I remember a couple of shows where there might have been some malfunctions, and not dangerous malfunctions, just a couple of things, which is freeze, because we are working with technology. For example, my phone keeps freezing on my odd facial expressions. But I felt like that became part of the spectacle, is that people almost wanted to wait for something bad to happen. Only because they knew that was unfortunately the trend. And I feel like that kind of just takes the beauty out of theater, where people wait for the chaos, can't wait to pull out their cell phones inside of a very safe theatrical space, just so they can capture when something is wrong. And there's something about that I always was kind of against. And like you said, you know, when people see one thing that's happening, they only focus on that one thing. But no, there are accidents happening everywhere, especially in theater, whether it's Broadway, off Broadway, off Broadway. It's just the battle of the beast. We are working with technology as we were working on these productions, and things constantly happen. But someone has to be the culprit that everyone points fingers at as being like the bad guy. And unfortunately, I feel like Spider-Man was that guy, you know, during that time.
I had a friend on a show, on an off-Broadway show, who it was a secret story because they didn't want it in the media. But like the cast, there were 2 cast members in the piece. A part of the set fell, and it was such a heavy piece. And the cast members were so close to it that they could have, you know, been hurt or killed by it, and no one talked about it. And like
no one talked about it.
I mean, because no one talked about it, and so that's why I asked the question, because I know that the media. I mean, all these years later, now that the show is closed, I mean, not like anybody's going to be paying attention to that, but like for theater people who are paying attention to know that story of Spider-Man, I was just kind of curious about, like, from a cast perspective, being caught up in that kind of whirlwind of like bad media for no particular reason.
Right. I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like we live in a time right now where people really thrive off of bad media. And for me, it's always been very difficult because I actually tried not to be. I just joined Instagram 2 months ago. And the only reason I've been a part of Facebook is because one of my best friends actually made it for me when I was in college, just because he was like, this is what you have to do. Everyone's doing it. But I say that all to say is that I feel like with the access that we have, you would think that these would be things that would be reminders of how to be better and not weaker. You know, now that we can see what's actually happening in front of us, now how can we take these examples and actually be stronger and better, not expose them, talk about them, and do absolutely nothing? That's the problem that I have with social media.
Totally. I totally agree. Well, so I feel like this is kind of a good moment to kind of get into our topic for today. So this week, we are going to be talking about being a content creator or an artist, or whatever you want to call it, in a current world where there's a lot of stuff going on, from the Me Too movement to Black Lives Matter issues, to literally just so many things. And more than it used to be, I feel like there is a responsibility that has been put on the shoulder of artists when they are creating anything that wasn't there even just like 10 years ago. You know, like even more now, if you seem to misstep, there are a lot of people who kind of call that out and whatnot. And so I was wondering if you guys, what are the responsibilities that you have noticed in pieces that you have worked on, where you've had to think about some of these social news pieces that have changed how you have wanted to create or portray what you were going to, or things like that? Does that make sense? That was kind of weird and wordy.
No, it's okay. Jermaine, would you like to?
Do we have Jermaine? He may be frozen. Well, so for me, I'll start off until we've got him back. But I have noticed that with this show specifically, this is a little bit less. I'm not creating a character. I'm not creating, you know, anything false. It's more just me speaking. And I've had. That's okay. And I have noticed that, like, I've had to really pay attention to the things that I'm saying in a different way than normal, because I feel like words are important, and I feel like the way that we voice things is important, and I feel like right now people are sensitive, and that's okay because there's a lot going on. But because of that sensitivity, we have to be more specific with our words. And I feel like, you know, we've noticed that Jermaine's going to log out and then log right back in. So we're going to do this. So I've noticed that even 10 years ago, you know, we've noticed with this issue with The Simpsons and the character Apu, who's kind of racist in a lot of ways.
Right.
When The Simpsons started, they were heralded for having an Indian character, whereas now the world is different. Did you guys run into that? I know with Jesus Christ Superstar, you had a super diverse cast. Was there discussion about any of this kind of thing?
Not necessarily. And I think only because our very brilliant director, David Laveau, I believe that, especially when we got into this space, everyone was so different and so unique, but very present. And someone said it perfectly. It was actually an ensemble full of principal players in other areas of theater. And I think there's something with that where he literally handpicked us because of our very strong individual presence and our ownership of self, our ownership of our race, our ownership of our voices, our ownership in the way that we talk, because everyone was, I felt, very distinctly different. And it wasn't something that was discussed. And I feel like maybe the reason it wasn't necessarily discussed or not even broadly discussed is because it was so relevant and so present in the room that there was no reason to even having to address it. There was a sense of freedom being like, I chose you for you and what you do, so do what you have to do. And I think talking about this movement in general, it's like having the ability and the confidence to kind of stand up for yourself. Like, we finally have the platform to do that now. So why not take ownership of who you are, what your voice sounds like, how you say the things you say, how you carry yourself in the room, how you leave the room after you've carried yourself throughout that room the entire day. I guess what I'm basically talking about is having some integrity, you know, and being able to take full ownership for who you are and carry that with a certain grace that actually is contagious amongst the people who are around you. So when I think of this, all of the movements that have been coming up, I definitely think it is a time now to take ownership for everything is happening and responsibility. So that way these things don't happen again. So that way we are not having a redundant and a reoccurrence of, you know, the Me Too movement. You know, women, stand up for yourselves. Be able to learn how to say the words no and fervently, you know, say it with power, say it with strength. And men, you know, be more responsible and listen to those women when they say no. So I just feel like people just need to take more ownership and responsibility of self. Because at the end of the day, you only have you know, to be responsible for, and know that your responsibility of self is to take care of all the other people around you.
Yes, 100%. Jermaine, yes. What was it that you were saying earlier when we lost you?
Well, what I was going to say was, I think particularly for me, like if we're going to talk about, I mean, all of these movements, but particularly Black Lives Matter, and what it's like to be a person of color in this country, you know, for me, there was a definite moment where I was going through a lot of stuff kind of like microaggression wise in my life. And this was going on, this was kind of all happening within the time frame of Eric Garner and Trayvon Martin and all of these shootings that were happening. And, you know, there are two times in my life that I have felt like vulnerably Black. And one was when I was in college. And one has been here in New York City, oddly enough. And so during this last like 5 years of police shootings and all of that. And so if you go back and look at my college writings, and if you go back and look at my Facebook timeline, what I've realized is that I am moved to write. I don't consider myself a writer, but I am moved to write when something's not right. And what was happening with me was, like I said, you go back and you look at my writings, and they're more vocally self-aware than I typically am on my day-to-day life. And I think that's where we are as a culture right now. And people are taking that as being like un-PC or being whiny or whatever the words that they use. But for me, it was like being unapologetically truthful, being unapologetically my Black, you know what I mean? Saying like what's happening with me and what's happening in my mind and what has happened to me. And I think that what you're seeing now is with Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement and Time's Up and the gun control debate. People are saying like, listen, this is what I believe. I'm unapologetic about it. I'm going to write about it. I'm going to create art about it. And there's also that level of, particularly for artists, what can I talk about and still be able to make a living and still be allowed to make a living?
Yeah, well, and this is something interesting to me is, you know, I feel like the first thought when an artist, at least for me, when an artist, me as an artist, decides to talk about something, I'm like, okay, let me create a show that is about gun reform, and we will talk about that the entire time. And that's not always the best route, A, because like you said, we got to get paid for it. But B, you know, for instance, Lin-Manuel Miranda has created a very wide discussion about diversity and race in the world of entertainment with, like, in a show that doesn't really talk about it that much. And he was able to do that because he had written In the Heights. And In the Heights was able to happen because of shows like Rent and West Side Story, you know, like which West Side Story talks about it pretty directly. But, you know, it's one of those things where sometimes you can create things that form the world around you that will help open eyes without trying to hit someone over the head, which takes some finesse.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what I also think is true is that In the Heights, or any particular show that kind of discusses or is any show in general, but particularly a show about race or sexual assault or gun violence or whatever kind of art you're creating, like, you can do it any way you want to, but sometimes, a lot of times, you have to be allowed to do it on a commercial or grand scale, right?
Yeah.
Like, the people who have the money might not want to become, I mean, you know, I had a producer friend say to me once, like, hey, be careful with what you post on your Facebook. Be careful of what you write, because the last thing I want you to become is a Colin Kaepernick. And I had to say to myself, like, I had that thought in my mind.
Yeah.
But, like, do I want to be a person who lives in this world and not speaks out and speaks up for other people and myself? Or do I want to double down and try to create art and try to create a story like In the Heights, right? Or like Hamilton, or any number of shows, or like a Scandal or whatever, where those stories aren't being told, and find ways for that to be able to be allowed to be presented to mass audiences.
Absolutely. Christina, have you noticed those times that Jermaine was talking about? Have you ever had and obviously you don't have to name names, but a producer or a friend or anyone approach you and tell you that you needed to be careful about voicing your opinion on certain things for your career?
Yes. I mean, I feel like as artists, unfortunately, we're actually trained to do that. You know, I remember I've been to an art school in high school and college. I went to LaGuardia High School, so I'm from New York City, and I went to NYU. So I feel like I've been very institutionalized. And I don't say that as a negative. I say that in terms of discipline. And so in most cases, I've always been taught to kind of be a player and not a creator. And my job is just to be quiet and just take the direction and just do what the creatives tell you to do. But now that I've had the opportunities to work, and I've experienced different types of energy in the room, it's nice to finally see, I feel like, an openness within the past, like 4 years, where the creatives, producers, directors, anyone actually values your voice and actually values your take on roles, your take on theories, anything that has anything to do for the benefit of the project. I feel like now there's definitely been an openness about the so-called staying woke. And I say that because one of my favorite things that Angela Rye says, the political correspondent, she says, stay woke, work woke. And I feel like there's something with that. You can't just like be awake. Being awake is just not one thing, but like to work awake is another. And there's actually more power in working when you're alive, when you're present, when you are so-called woke. And so my goal every time I go into a room is to be as present and open as possible, bring in all the stuff that I understand. And I say baggage, not in terms of like I'm just dumping trash into the room, but bringing in my experiences, having that inform what it is that I'm doing and bring light to it, you know, and then have the creatives to say yes or no that this works. you know, because at the end of the day, it's their project. But as an artist, I can't help but bring in all the stuff that makes me.
Yeah. You know, I have thought about this similarly, because if you have been on my Twitter, it is full of political retweets and bad jokes. And it's something that I have thought about before, of being like, man, you're really vocal. Like, is that could be a problem at times. And for me, I came to the conclusion of, but I'm really vocal. Like, that's what you get with me. And if that's risky for some people, that sucks, but like, that's how it is. And that for me, at least, I feel like you're right in the sense that the industry is changing. I feel like that is being supported and applauded more than it ever has, of voicing atrocities and things like that. But it definitely is one of those things where that can be a hindrance for sure.
Right. And just to add on to what you're saying, I think you definitely, both of you are actually building an avenue for yourself where you are, because you've already created the voice of honesty and opinion and freedom of speech. You know, you've already are building a brand and a platform to kind of extend that sort of brand, I guess you can call it, and go off into your creative juices and continue with that same sort of momentum. You know, I feel like once you already establish what that is, then people can choose to be or be without you, you know, but at least the people who are with you are going to help actually build you to that next level. Like, for example, this platform that you've created right now, like, what a wonderful platform to give not only yourself, but artists an opportunity to say the things that are actually happening in real life. You know, why are we pretending none of these things happen? The more that we close our eyes, the more that we close our mouths and pretend that nothing is happening, the less that things will actually change. You know,
and who else is going to say it?
No one's going to say it.
You know, like I always say, I mean, you know, even when I, you know, got my equity card, like, I didn't have an agent, and I got hired for 2 different contracts that year, and I said to one of the theaters, I'm like, I'm ready to join equity, and they're like, no, we can't offer you that. And then the next show I got offered, which was a few weeks after that contract ended, I was like, hey, I'm ready to join equity. Can you offer me my card? And they were like, yeah, we can do that for you. And like, the lesson for me in that particular moment that goes across all things in my life is, you are your own only advocate. You are your best advocate, and you have to not be afraid to say what you want, what you need, what you feel. And it can be scary. I mean, I just yesterday wrote a long diatribe about something about RuPaul's Drag Race on a friend's wall, because I felt like there was some kind of racial component that people were ignoring about it. And it was about Drag Race. You know what I mean? And so, like, but I had to, like, let my, there was something that was not being said on that thread that I felt needed to be said, so that people realized what they were saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you definitely do at times have to weigh things, because I've probably deleted more tweets than I've actually put out there of me, like, at first being like, and then being like, you know what, this isn't the battle, this isn't the time. You know, like, you haven't spoken to this person in 6 years. Why do you want to argue with them on the internet? But then there's also those times where I'm like, you know, this is a problem that this isn't being talked about. And I feel like I can voice this in a manner that is disarming and, like, brings things down a little bit, but that still gets the point across. There was something when the shooting in Nashville happened, and Donald Trump decided not to tweet about it. A friend of mine posted an article about that. One of their friends was like, he's the president of the United States. Why does he have to talk about everything? You know, all this kind of stuff. And I took the chance to say, I understand what you're saying. It does seem weird to ask the president, who has so much on his plate, to talk about everything that happens in the US. However, I think that the area that this makes people uncomfortable is that our president has decided to talk about a lot of things and has decided to tweet about almost anything that comes across his plate. And so that makes it, when he doesn't talk, that makes his silence deafening, and it makes people upset and it hurts people. And so I think that that's where people are coming from. Not necessarily that in this moment, Donald Trump is being bad. But in this moment, people are saying, he talked about, Fox and Friends ratings. Why isn't he talking about this? This is important to me, and I want this to be talked about.
May I add on to that?
Yeah.
Kind of going back to what you were saying in terms of like all the tweets that you had written, but they never been posted. I feel like there is a certain, and I think you mentioned this, Jermaine, the word finesse. But for a certain way, this is the one thing that I've learned as an actor is like, am I not receiving this note right now because I'm being resistant and defensive because I know I'm right and I know that my voice matters? Or am I being resistant because there's actually a little bit of truth in what they're saying? I'm being called out, so I have to sometimes take a step back and not be so reactionary, or I don't know if I just made up a word, but not kind of respond off of an attitude that comes off of self. Oftentimes what I do as an exercise before I am to post something or send a text is that if I'm really frustrated about something, I actually do a stream of consciousness and I write it in my phone or on a piece of paper first, just so I can really see what are the things that I'm really bothered by, and then try to find this. And I always find the second time of writing around, there's a little bit of a finesse or a universal language that I've used in order where I could feel like it reaches out to all the masses and it doesn't feel selfish, I guess you can say. I don't know if I'm really making sense because I don't really write a lot of stuff on social media because there's this fear that a lot of it's not going to be heard. So I'm not really that person.
Yeah, I do write a lot. I mean, not recently because I'm busy with the concert, but I do, as I was saying earlier, I rate my Insta full page analysis of Dolly Parton that I've not posted yet. But like seeing situations that are problematic and being able to realize that I have quite a few friends who do not have that finesse, and I've talked to them about it. Because people consider me somehow a writer who's good with his words, and that's because I think about it. And the Dolly Parton thing that I've written is not. I mean, it's and I won't talk about it right now, but I'll post it sometime later. But it's not so much that like I don't like Dolly Parton, but there's something problematic about her career that we're not talking about, and it's not so much don't like her. It's like, if we're going to talk about all of these things, here is a well thought out like stream of thought, as you said, about what we need to talk about and what is more problematic in the world at large.
And it's less about
it's less about fuck you, which is like how people basically write now.
Oh, good. We can curse on this platform. I was
Totally. Okay. Sorry,
good.
We should have told you that. We don't give two shits.
I was like, oh.
And Jermaine, what I was going to say is it's also less about like, oh, I really hate the song Jolene, and more about Dixie Stampede has racist undertones. That we're not talking about. And I think that this goes back to an issue of people wanting things to be black and white. There's no human on the planet who's 100% good. I like to think that Barack Obama is very close, but past that, like everybody's got those things. If you look at any person in history that did great things, they also did probably some pretty bad things. And like it's okay to talk about that, and it's okay to bring it up and say we should address this and not ignore it
or know about it. Or just at least know about it. I mean, like going back to what Christina said earlier, I mean, it's not so much about, I feel, not saying the thing that you want or being scared of being selfish. Is like, as my grandmother always used to say, it's not about what you say or what you do. It's about how you say and how you do it.
Yes.
And you can say horrible things if that's what certain comedians have. That's how they make their career. And it's what is the impetus behind what you're saying? Is it to be an asshole? Is it to be an ally? Like, what is behind it? And, you know, making sure that when you post it or you talk about it, that you know where you come from and that you're clear in that message.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Right.
So one thing before we go, and I feel like we're kind of talking about this, but specifically with like creating art in whatever way that means to you, how do we do that? How do we create art that forms the world that we want to live in? You know, like what are either steps or things that you have experienced or whatever that have made it so that you've been able to create something that you feel like is going to be helpful down the road to make this world better? Because for me, one of my thoughts is, though this is now much more loaded, is, for instance, something like The Cosby Show really did change the world for the better in so many ways. You know, like and we talked about this a lot last week, but that wasn't necessarily a show that was like, hey, every week we're going to talk about why Black people are getting killed, but it was about humanizing Black people, which was very important at the time. You know, things like that.
Its existence was radical, right? Like the existence of the Cosby Show at that, right? Like, as you were saying before, real quick, kind of going backwards. That multiple things can exist. You know what I mean? Like, Bill Cosby is a rapist. So Cosby also changed the landscape of America and the landscape of how Black people are seen in this country. To some extent, like for at least for that particular amount of time. And like I said last week or 2 weeks ago, like, I don't know if we would have had a Barack Obama without a Bill. Also doesn't change the fact that Bill Cosby is a rapist. You know, Donald Trump can be a charismatic figure, but Donald Trump is also hugely problematic. You know, these things, it's not, as you said, it's not black and white. And I guess to answer your question, going back to answer your question, I think what I always say to my friends who, particularly when they ask me about racial issues, or like, you know, it's hard for me to talk about like misogyny, but just in general, like, hard because I'm not a woman and that I don't feel like that I can give the voice, an authentic voice to that discussion. I think the best way for artists to go about creating their art, and this is the same way I talk about being an ally, is clean your own house first. You know what I mean? Like, what you know and what your expertise is or what your experience is the voice that needs to be heard. Not you. We don't need to hear about what you don't know. We need to hear about what you do know and what you have experienced, and that's how I can be impactful. You know, I'm not going to talk about what it's like to be a Black woman, or I'm not going to talk about what it's like to be a white woman. I can talk about what it's like to be a 300-pound big Black man in America.
Now, one thing that I want to touch on this, it's more a question than anything. I have a friend who is a musical theater composer, and he is a straight white male, and he is writing a show that has a gay character in it. They're not the lead, so he's not trying to speak about the gay experience, but he is wanting to be inclusive of that person in his piece. And he has had people come up to him and say that that's not his place to write about.
Wow.
What do you guys feel about that? Because there is that level of like, he doesn't understand the life of a gay man, but he's wanting to not write a show that's 100% about white people.
Right. Do you want to talk about that, Christina, or do you want me to?
Well, it's funny because I have so many thoughts. So many thoughts. So I'm not a believer. Okay, so I believe that if you have enough history and understanding and research, but understand like the psychology of the thing that you're talking about, like the really underlying psychology. If you can have compassion and passion for that, then I believe you can write about anything. And I don't feel like you have to be of the race or of the sexuality to really have understanding. But what I cannot stand, and this is not anything with your friend's friend or the person, but just in general, what I do not like is when it comes from a very surfaced Wikipedia point of view.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where, I mean, and you can almost see that in performance where it feels like I feel like I've read this somewhere. Not necessarily, I mean, when I go to a performance, when I go see a theater, I want to feel transformed. I want to feel like I'm leveled up, I'm taken to a different place, I'm bigger or stronger or more informed than before I walked into this space. But with that, I do believe that people have the right to express whatever story they feel like they want to express. Let's just hope that it's authentic, you know, and it doesn't have to be authentic just because you are gay or you are Black. There have been many shows that I know that have been written by a person who wasn't of color, that was a story of of people of color. And you can, and I've seen some performances that are actually really wonderfully rooted, but then I've also seen performances that feel very surfaced and very by the book, you know? And so I just encourage those who are going to write stories that are outside of themselves to really go deeper and really start to understand the psychology. Because I feel like what we're missing is the psychology of the prejudiceness, of the hate, of the anything that has something to do with some sort of like injustice. Understand the body of it and not just the trend or the surface of it all.
Well, so real quick, real quick, I want to bring in someone from the Facebook Live video. Olivia Jones is asking, how much research do you feel is required before it's okay to write about or express?
I guess I was going to go to my point,
Great.
Which I was going to piggyback off of Christina, which is, so I think that if you are a person who's writing about a person that you are not, then probably owe it to yourself to then present what you are writing to at least 3 or 4 of those people that you're writing about.
Yes, I agree.
So that they can like let you know. So like what I do know is from doing these vlogs, from being a guest on these vlogs for the past however many months, is that there are like diversity panels that writers go to where it's like, hey, here's a database of a bunch of different writers. And some of them are queer, some of them are Black, some of them are queer and Black, some of them are queer and Asian. And the writers can then, you know, send their work, and they can pay other writers to like review their work and give their kind of input about like, is it coming from an authentic place? Is it coming from a surface place? And one of the things, the Muse Match situation that we did this past week that Christina so beautifully performed at.
Thank you.
Part of that event is part of an event called Idealist Day, which is a way to kind of mobilize the channel. There's an organization called Ring of Keys, and Ring of Keys is a realize that gay theater world that lesbians and queer women and non-binary women and non-conforming, all of that were feeling left out of the conversation, particularly in theater. And so they're creating their own database of all of those communities, queer women, bi women, just the whole umbrella, so that casting directors can then find people who can write more authentically and perform more authentically.
Yeah, well, and the thing is so I worked last year in casting for like 9 months, and often we did shows that were very new, and a lot of them had people of literally every type you can think of. We at one point had to find a Ukrainian sousaphone player, and so sometimes, and I don't want to like forgive people who make just like drastic casting choices that are harmful, but there are certain times where finding the right artists is very difficult, and finding like if you don't already know people in that community, then it's hard to get word that these auditions are happening to that person, right? And so things like this with Ring of Keys, where they are putting together these databases is so amazing because it just helps, you know, like I guarantee there are so many casting directors who, if they had this, would be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. This makes my life easier. Now I don't have to feel so bad about not being able to find people that fit XYZ. You know, it's so helpful. For anyone watching, if you are wondering more about this like inclusion conversation, you can go back. We talked a bit about it with Georgia Stitt and Maggie Keenan-Bolger a few weeks ago. And we have a video, so you should go watch it too. But yeah, I feel like it's difficult, but there are people out there doing really good work to make it better, which is all you can hope for.
And just to add on to that, I just did I was at Joe's Pub on Monday hosting Musical Theater Factory, because what Shakina's been doing there is actually creating an environment where anyone from the transgender community can actually be songwriters and musicians and create work and art and stories about their personal experiences, because we're seeing a huge surge of that. Yeah. And so what she's done is actually create a platform where everyone can get together and literally just divulge all of their personal stories into art. And so there are so many people coming from all layers of like life now who have this freedom of voice and is able to now put it in their art. So I'm excited for the next couple of years to see how that changes.
Well, and actually Musical Theater Factory, the casting director I work for, Kate Lumpkin, is the casting director for Musical Theater Factory. And so it's been really, I think, exciting for her to be able to really start finding these amazing trans, non-gender conforming, like all these people for these shows that, like, Joe Iconis wrote a show that had people of every kind, specifically women of every kind in it. And, you know, it's been really exciting to be able to give these people a platform to share their voice, who have been yearning for it and wanting it so much. It's been really wonderful to be able to like work with those people and help in any way. So yeah, that's been really cool.
Which goes back to like, right, what we were saying earlier of these people, these stories exist in this world, and they always have, and they've not, in so many cases, not been allowed to tell their stories. And now, because we're in this shift, you know, I mean, Broadway Unlocked, the Give Back concert is a prime example of a topic that was very topical and has been a topic since the beginning of time. People were too scared to talk about, and that's violence and sexual assault and hate crimes. And, you know, one of the hard parts about doing the Give Back concert, and one of the reasons why the Give Back concert was created, was because it wasn't, and Jess has been told this plenty of times, it's just not sexy, kind of sexier cause to like benefit the Give Back concert. And within the last 6 months, you know, for better or worse, and for lack of a better term, Me Too and Time's Up, which has been happening for now assault is now a sexy crime, and now people want to be involved with it. And
it's something that's being talked about. Well, guys, this has been a wonderful conversation. I have had a wonderful time, and I feel like it's an important conversation to have. I appreciate you both spending your Sunday mornings coming on to talk with us. Christina, I know you were saying beforehand that your week is just absolutely crazy, so I have really appreciated having you come on. Jermaine, thank you so much. You're like a rock on this show, so I always appreciate having you on.
This is really awesome, and thank you for everything that you're doing too. This is really important.
Thank you.
It is really, it feels like a gospel almost, you know, like it's a great Sunday morning treat, because I feel like something about Sundays is a refresher for the rest of your week. And there's something very, very church about this. And I don't mean that in religious terms, in terms of like getting people together to talk about the things that matter.
Yeah, it's cathartic for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, guys, go ahead.
Real quick, as a plug, because as Carl said earlier, the Give Back concert is a week from today, May 13th, and Christina is going to be performing. So make sure you tune in for that. And so we can continue this gospel on Sunday night.
Yes.
Keep your eyes out there, folks. It's going to be great.
Yes.
You're going to want to tune in. Bye. Guys, thanks for watching. Do you know what next week is? It's the Give Back concert. It's the Give Back concert. Make sure that you have liked our Facebook page. That's going to be so important, so that you have all the details on how to start the live stream, how to donate to my and Kelly's fundraiser for the Give Back concert. Make sure that you have shared this video and that you are commenting. We want to hear what you have to say. And we'll be here next week live again for a special edition before we go live for the Give Back concert!